So, you like Zombicide? Well, I do too. In fact, I have a bit of a problem with Zombicide because I have Zombicide Black Plague and Green Horde and Marvel Zombies and I have DCs coming my way and I'll probably back whatever CMON puts out as far as their next Zombicide titles, but there's more out there. There are more games out there. I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and this is part of my series of games. If you like a specific game, let's try some others. And this time round, we're doing this with Zombicide. If you like Zombicide, if you've enjoyed this game, this dungeon crawler-esque of a game with powers and abilities, way too many survivors to go ahead and count, characters you're going to be using, this box is well worn over here, characters you're going to be using to take down the impending swarm every single turn, going through a sequence of you taking actions to be able to defeat the mob while the mob takes their actions to try to keep you at bay and hopefully eventually eat you to death. That's basically what Zombicide is offering. But there are a lot more great games that are in this umbrella, this genre of this type of game, this type of an experience. And today we're going to be going through 8 of my favorite with a caveat. One of them I haven't played yet. 7 of my favorite with one that I'm very much looking forward to play that are games that are like Zombicide that you might be interested in. I'm going to start off with the very first one, which is Pandemic. Now, I do have Pandemic Legacy on the table over here, only because that's currently all I have in my collection to show you, but I'm referring to the original OG, the original Pandemic, the base version of it, none of the offshoots, none of the variants, none of the legacy games of the Pandemic system. But Pandemic is not necessarily the grandfather, but one of the more known, respected, been around for a while in the basic genre of you do good things, game does bad things, and you're trying to outpace the game in order to go for the win. In Pandemic, similar to in Zombicide over here, you're going to be controlling multiple characters, each with their own abilities. And then similar to Zombicide, every single round the game is going to be throwing bad things at you. Except instead of, well, zombies, the game is throwing disease cubes your way. The board is slowly populating with diseases that are getting harder and harder to contain. You need to go to a zone, slowly take out those diseases, try to cure and heal the zone as much as possible, while being mindful of outbreaks, being mindful of starting your zone, starting your turn in areas with outbreaks, in areas that have broken out. You're going to be trying to basically stay one step ahead of the game as the game throws things at you. There's going to be characters, there's going to be powers and abilities, there's going to be the general cooperative sequence of play, and they're going to have a lot of general overlap while being thematically worlds apart as far as what they do. I say worlds apart, but then there's also a Pandemic Cthulhu, which kind of has a zombie kind of aspect to it while being very different. From there, we have one that's probably more of a direct comparison to Zombicide from CMON Games. In fact, CMON Games has like 4 of the games on this list. Say what you want about them, but they do make a similar type of game. And so they have a bunch of games that kind of fall into that, roll dice, control characters, take down the baddies in a cooperative genre. And we have 4 of those today. Well, Zombicide and 3 others. But we do have 8 other games for you, so 8 total games, so 9 including Zombicide. So we have a bunch of other recommendations that are not from CMON. But we have Massive Darkness. I have on the table here the original version over here, but I do have Massive Darkness 2 Hellscape, which is the one I'd recommend. I just have all the goodies. In fact, I don't even know what's in this box. I'm pretty sure there's just more of the various baggies of the original the original Massive Darkness, because I use these and mix these in with my Hellscape set. But Massive Darkness is going to give you a very similar feeling to Zombicide. You are controlling a bunch of heroes. You are wandering through a dungeon. Similar to Massive Darkness, similar to Zombicide and Massive Darkness, they're both episodic. They're not campaign-based. They're going to give you individual scenarios you can go ahead and go through as this box slowly gets pushed down over here. But you're trying to stay alive, you're trying to take down the baddies. The system is a little different. It's not based on, well, zombies. It has a different flow, a different structure. This one is a little bit more survival with goals. This one's a little bit more progression and adventure with goals. There are differences to the systems and the ways they operate, but if you like one, you're bound to like both of them. Massive Darkness 2 Hellscape in particular gives you strong asymmetric ways that the roles operate within the game, so each class has its own unique aspect of how it operates, while each character within that class still has unique differences as far as how they are compared to the whole class as a general rule. That means you can utilize all your original Massive Darkness content, which I have, in order to be able to give you just an absolute ton of dungeon crawling gameplay with dice chucking, dice rolling, and having a good time within a general dungeon crawler cooperative scenario. Or game. From there we have another one which is going to hit some of those same notes, and another kind of tale of good versus evil and the angels you're facing off against. You see Massive Darkness 2 Hellscape is going to very much have a angel and demons kind of theme to it, and so does Deliverance, making this a good one to follow up on. But Deliverance is a little different than a dungeon crawler. This one's going to be more of a skirmish game, where you're going to go ahead and have your angels, you're going to have your demons. There is no discovery, there is no unlocking new stuff on the board, well, there is in a manner of speaking, but you're not exploring a dungeon per se. Rather, you are going to have your angels, you're going to face off against the various demons that are coming your way, and once you take them down, you're going to go to the next step where you have to face off against more demons, and this time the prince. The game is going to give you these traits where the angels elevate, gathering more abilities abilities and powering up throughout the course of this venture. There's going to be equipment and gear you're going to have. There's also a campaign mode. There's going to be prayer cards. They give you these one-time abilities. There's so many different things to explore in the game, but if you like the basic idea of just diving down into the darkness, taking down enemies, has, again, similarities to a dungeon crawler while being very different because of the nature of being a skirmish game, but has enough similarities that if you like them, if you want to see, get a sense of what other games are out there, if you like games like Zombicide, it is worth checking out Deliverance to see if this slight adjustment, while maintaining the powers and abilities, while maintaining the combat, while maintaining the head-to-head use of everything at your disposal to take down the enemies, does that give you a similar enough vibes, or are you looking for more of a dungeon crawler cooperative type game instead, as opposed to what Deliverance has to offer? But we're not done there. We have a bunch of other games to go, and this one is going to give you a bit of a pick up and deliver kind of experience with Deep Rock Galactic. This is going to give you Zombicide, pick up and deliver, Deep Rock Galactic. It's based on the video game. This is the one game on the table that I have not played, unfortunately, but I am eager to dive into it. You see, Deep Rock Galactic, based on the video game, has amazing miniatures. It's going to give you that same dice rolling, chucking combat with your own unique characters, with the unique ways they operate. Meanwhile, you're trying to go ahead and gather all these various precious minerals and resources so you can go ahead and survive whatever scenario you're going off after. Again, this is going to be a scenario-driven game. This is not going to be a campaign offering. It's going to be episodic, so you're diving into scenario after scenario, trying to figure out how to take down the baddies with your characters and stay one step ahead of them, but it's going to have that same kind of, again, general vibes, while giving you a bit more of a mission situation to dive into. You have more of a pick up and deliver. There's things you're trying to accomplish. Don't get me wrong, many of these games do give you missions or goals or scenarios, but this one's very much focused on, hey, you're just here to mine. Unfortunately, there's bugs in your way, and those bugs need shooting and killing and taking out, and that's where you come into the mix. And so that's going to be Deep Rock Galactic, one I'm eager to play myself, and I mean, the reviews on this one are very positive. Production is off the charts, and the general theme and type of game is exactly my kind of experience. Although, speaking of missions, we also have Project Elite, which is going to give you a similar kind of concept. We're back to Command over here, and we have just tons more characters, tons more baddies heading your way, but this is going to give you a real-time twist on some of those concepts. You see, in Project Elite, you basically crash land on a desert planet. You're going to have the aliens wandering towards your base. There are different maps. You're going to have your characters, but this is giving you a real-time game. You're going to be constantly and frequently rolling dice, trying to prevent the aliens from making your way to your base, except the problem is, the dice are how you shoot and kill the aliens. Meanwhile, you're trying to go out into the forest, into the wilds, to be able to try to accomplish your objectives and go to certain pylons and construct and roll dice and do whatever it is you need to do. So you have these objectives. You have to make your way out there, but the problem is you also have to kill the aliens. You have to move. You have to do all these things. They require rolling dice. The problem is every time you roll those dice, the aliens are moving depending on the symbols you roll, which is not fun because the things you need to do involve the aliens slowly making their way closer to you, so you are trying to just deal with the tension because it's all real time. If you roll slower, you have more control. If you roll faster, you have less control, but you can get more done. The odds are in your favor a bit as far as rolling dice frantically to get things done, but you also have to be able to utilize your dice as fast as possible, as opposed to having those aliens march towards you and just slowly running out of time on this game. It's a fast-paced game. It's going to give you the same kind of feelings you got from, well, any of these other games, but with real-time mixed in, which may or may not be for you, but if it is, it's a delightful experience. It's one of the only real-time games I've actually had in my collection for a long time. I find real-time can be a fun little gimmick that I usually enjoy the experience, but then I also move on from those games. And this time around it's sticking around. And then we have Resident Evil over here. You see, most of these games have you dealing with a lot of run and gun. You're just trying to basically just roll dice, kill things, do what you need to do, inflict as much possible power as you can, and in Resident Evil, that gets very hard. It gets a little easier later on in the experience, but starting off the bat, it's very hard because starting off the bat, you have no ammo, or very little ammo to speak of. And the problem is when you roll dice, you only kill things on a 6. So you're rolling a die, and maybe you knock them back, but you're only killing things on a 6, which means on average, every 6 bullets you have equals 1 death. That's not a lot of zombie killing when you don't have a lot of bullets. Now, things will progress throughout the game. You'll unlock more weapons, but you learn very quickly in Resident Evil that you have to try to be on top of the strategic aspects of the game, not just the combat aspects. You have to know when to close a door, when it's going to trigger activations of the enemy. You have to know what's chasing you. You have to slowly explore the map because Resident Evil, if you played any of the other Resident Evil games from Steamforged, they all had predefined set maps. Resident Evil, the board game, doesn't. In this one over here, the third one in the series, they have a fourth one coming. In this one, the map is slowly unlocking as you go, so you're progressing through the experience, revealing tiles, revealing sections of the board, which adds an extra level of tension as you are literally exploring the map. Not just opening a door and seeing what's there, but you don't even know what the map will look like until you get to that part of the experience. It's a delightful experience, a lot of fun, very tense, although again, it's going to lean into some of the things you've liked about these other games, but it's going to dial it down a bit in terms of sheer aggression and opt for a much more harrowing experience where you are constantly afraid for your life, you constantly feel outgunned by the enemies, because you are, and it's about the tactical maneuvering more than anything else, knowing when to kick an enemy into a barrel, shoot that barrel, have it go boom, because that is a more reliable way to kill a bunch of things than trying to slowly shoot them, which takes way too much time and precision. Next up, we have one that is a big break from these experiences. A big break to a large degree. This is one I debated whether I consider it similar or not, but I have to include it. That's going to be Too Many Bones. Now right here I have Unbreakable, which is the newest iteration of the game, newest standalone version, but there's Too Many Bones Undertow, there's Too Many Bones base game, and there's Too Many Bones Unbreakable. All three of those are ways to start off into this game series. And then from there there's expansions galore, characters galore, and all that stuff. But this over here is branching out very differently from some of the things you've seen so far. It has that general cooperative experience. I think every single game on the table here is a cooperative game because they are leaning into that feeling. But this over here is going to be ramping up the level of difficulty, the level of character depth, and trading that off for the fact that you are still dealing with a skirmish game. More of a skirmish game than a dungeon crawl, kind of series episodic based to a certain degree, but within each game. Meaning you effectively go after a boss, and along the way you go on these journeys. Each card represents a map setup, so you're constantly resetting up a map and then taking things down. If you've played Deliverance at this point, it's got a similar vibe to Deliverance, where Deliverance has enemies, then enemies and boss. This one has enemies, 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 and boss. The various bosses you select will give you various degrees of game length, so you can try to play this game for an hour and a half, you can try to play the game for 4 hours, depending on what your vibe is, and 4 hours will give you more character progression, more growth, more difficulty, and more of a crushing defeat when the boss slams your head into the ground for the 4th time at the end of the scenario. I do find in this game that the bosses are the hardest part. The rest of it's kind of literally just setting yourself up and building up your character for that epic endgame, which means you do often have a good time along the way, taking out the various baddies, and then eventually you find out whether you took out the various baddies well enough that you can also take down that final boss that is a challenge. This one is an investment. Not just monetarily it's an investment too, but this one is an investment in the sense that if you like, I would say, for almost everything else we're talking about today, if you like Zombicide, I highly encourage those games as games that might work for you in different ways. There's going to be things that are better and worse, but I think these are all fairly safe picks. Too Many Bones is a bit more for you. It's a bit more in terms of, again, the cost. All these are all expensive games. It's a bit more in terms of the mental weight. It's a bit more in terms of the differences. They don't have miniatures, they have chips. So everything is a bit different about Too Many Bones. This one I have more caveats to in terms of recommending it here, but I still think it's a nice level of something else but similar to dive into in the genre. And then my last recommendation is one that I do think is very similar to Zombicide. Honestly, this one I've saved for last just because it's my favorite one on the table. But that's going to be Cthulhu Death May Die. Cthulhu Death May Die, CMON's last title on this table, which some of you may have seen coming if you've watched my channel enough and you know that I said there's another CMON game coming. Or technically I didn't say there's another one, I just told you how many there were coming and you only saw 2 of them. But we have Cthulhu Death May Die, which is very much going to give you that dungeon crawling vibe, that kind of exploration aspect, the episodic base instead of campaign driven. So you are going through a bunch of episodes over here. There's no progression from episode to episode. You could invent your own mini-campaign, something I've done. But the general idea of this one is you're facing off against the various Elder Gods. You pick a scenario, and then you pick an Elder God, and you mix them, and then you go ahead and have your own somewhat unique scenario. Meanwhile, you have your investigators along the way. They're also going to mix things up, because your investigators are going to totally change the way you approach a scenario, and then ultimately it's up to you to try to figure out what you're trying to do. Well, that's not entirely true. The game and the episode is going to tell you what you're trying to do. It's up to you to try to figure out how you're going to try to do that thing. Which way are you going to try to approach this challenge? Are you going to try to go head on? Are you going to try to run past things? Are you going to try to, what do you have to do? What skill set are you going to combine? And meanwhile, you're constantly going insane. There's 2 reasons I love this game. There's more than 2, but there's 2 that I'm going to focus on right now. The first is the fact that in this game, as you go insane, you are powering up. You can die in this game either through just sheer death or going insane. Either one results in you no longer being able to help your teammates take down the Elder God and hopefully save the world. But going insane has you also powering up. So there's always this trade-off of early on in the game, you're like, go ahead, bring on that insanity. I want to unlock those abilities and take things out. And then end game, you're like, whoa, I'll hold it back a little bit. That was too much coffee for today. Now I'm a little jittery and I'm worried I'm going to die. And so you have that kind of tenseness to the game. But then the second aspect I love is the boss is constantly ramping up. When you eventually do face off against the Elder One, and the scenario is a challenge the whole way through, but when you do finally hit that Elder One has such a degree of power ramp that meanwhile your team has power ramp, and it just has a giant power creep towards the end game, which means every game of Cthulhu Death May Die ends in a cinematic masterpiece of something happening. Maybe you win, maybe you lose, but either way along the way it felt close. It felt like you either could have won or you could have lost, whichever way it ends up going. I love that power creep, I love that tenseness. Cthulhu Death May Die is easily my favorite game from CMON Games, and my favorite game on this table over here, and my favorite game in this genre of experience. highly recommend you give this one a shot if you've enjoyed any of the other games on the table. And that's it. Here we have it. 8 games if you like Zombicide. These are all 8 fantastic experiences that share similarities with what Zombicide gives to you. So if you found Zombicide, you wanted it into a Target, a Walmart, a Best Buy. Best Buy sells board games? I don't think they do. But wherever you manage to get your hands on a copy of Zombicide, if you're looking for other games that give you that similar feeling, similar vibe, well, first of all, there's 8 other Zombicides. But if you decide that you don't want to do that, then these are all great choices. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.